Hi, I'm Lee Godden. Welcome to Good Business. It's been a year since we broadcast our first episode, sharing with viewers like you our interviews with CEOs and other leaders of ethically profitable companies. These executives understand that corporations have dual responsibilities: to consistently reward investors with profitable performance and also to pay genuine attention to issues such as the environment, community relations, employee relations, and customer relations. We'd like to thank you for supporting this important television program. It was quite an honor recently to accept the Charter Communications Award for the Best New Television Program of 2005. So join us now for a look back at the top 10 moments from the first year of Good Business. We begin with a recent episode on which Dr. Mick Utlea explains why he and his wife Louise donated $2.5 million to establish the new Center for Ethical Leadership at California State University, Long Beach. During our interview, Mick speaks about excellence in business leadership, the intersection of ethics, morality, and religion, and using personal affluence to positively influence the teaching of applied ethics at the university level. What made you help the university establish this new Center for Ethical Leadership?
Well, you know, we feel very strongly that we all have things we've been given. We have a stewardship of affluence and also a stewardship of influence. And this Center for Ethical Leadership really fit in beautifully with our goals to help people deploy their best self.
Affluence and influence.
Affluence and influence. We all have a certain amount of influence, and we're to use that to better mankind. And we have affluence as well. Not everybody has the same amount, but we're to use those things to accomplish good. No better way to help train leaders than to start at the collegiate level. And one of the things you said there I think is important: applied ethics. This is not pie in the sky stuff. I was a philosophy major at Cal State Long Beach, and I took ethics courses, and there are different theories of ethics, but a lot of it was pretty ethereal, axiomatic, academic. This is applied ethics. We want people to understand how to integrate good, solid, ethical, and leadership principles into their daily lives, whether it's at work, at home, their life in general. We don't believe there's such a thing as business ethics as much as there are ethics that are integrated and applied to the field of business, or it could be to journalism. We need to teach ethics today, and no better place to start than at the university level. Self-awareness leads to self-management. Social awareness leads to relationship management. A lot of people are not aware of what animates them, and it gets in the way of their leadership role. It gets in the way of their success in life in general. My whole philosophy is that God has created all these principles by which this universe works. He created time, space, matter, energy, and every principle in this universe is His.
In the news, 9/11 and what's happening even more recently on the terrorist front,
Right.
It seems a lot to be tied into religious intolerance. And yet, I believe, with far less education in theology than you, but it seems like a lot of the world's religions have the same ethics of reciprocity built inside what they teach, what they espouse. And yet, where is the tolerance for others? Where is the tolerance for differences? Is it a failing in terms of the world's religions to properly teach their flock what tolerance for differences truly is?
I think if you go to the core of those religions, you will find that there is tolerance. It's the way some people take it and apply it. You can find that in every religion. For instance, you can't go to Scripture, for instance, and find that, but you can find people who claim to be Christians or Muslims or Buddhists or whatever, who will have a certain bent toward intolerance. And unfortunately, right now, it's mostly in the Islam world. But I think there's room for disagreement. There's plenty of room for disagreement. Tolerance is a very important thing, but I like to talk about the fallacy of tolerance, and it's this. I think that you have every right to believe what you believe. I'm interested more in clarity than I am agreement. So we might not agree, but let's talk about it and get some clarity here. So I say egalitarian with people, elitist with ideas.
Right.
You have every right to hold your view. All I ask is that you hold it intelligently. But when it comes to an idea in the great marketplace of life, I'm an elitist. Here's my philosophy. If you take dysfunction and mix it with spirituality, you have a very lethal combination. So unhealthy people who now are speaking for God or Allah, those are very dangerous people. Now, healthy people that are doing this, they're not dangerous. They have some great principles that they can present because they're good. But you can take all of that kind of thing and warp it, so it's a very dangerous combination.
It seems like we do need to get back to more of the golden rule philosophy, if you will, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that does really permeate most of the world's major religions. But
every religion has that.
It really does, and yet not practiced so much. Now we flip the switch on our Wayback Machine to our first episode, Excuse My Hairdo. Here we speak with CEO coach Paul Walker, discussing the personality types of the leaders of today's largest companies and how Paul brings out their personal genius to help them continue to grow financially and ethically. You quote, discover individual genius and team wisdom. What does that mean?
What does that mean? Well, most coaches and consultants try to find out what's wrong with people or organizations or companies, and they put their focus then on fixing what is wrong. Now, most people, in order to change a bad habit, in order to change a weakness, takes years and years and years, right? Not very effective in the business world.
Bad habits are tough to lose.
Bad habits are very difficult to change. What I do is I help people find what they're really good at, what their genius is. Each individual on an executive team, the CEO and the various executive team members, has a certain genius, something they're really excellent at. I help them discover that, and then I synchronize the team around the genius of each of the individuals. You will become a better player and you will become a better team if you have a goal that is difficult, that is challenging, but that everybody believes in. It has to be something that everyone just is totally committed to.
In the post-Enron era in which we find ourselves now, with the higher focus on corporate ethics and responsibility, if somebody says, I need profits up by 25% to increase the stock price, to appease our investors, our board of directors and so forth, is there also an ethical checks and balances system in place?
Is it ethical to cheat the government, right?
A taxes issue? Or?
A taxes issue, right? So we all do our income taxes and push the law to the edge of the envelope, right? And so do businesses, right? They want to pay as few taxes as possible. Well, there's a line when you get past the edge of the envelope when you could go to jail, right? And
that's a legal compliance issue.
It's really a legal compliance, because in business, if you're not ethical, if you don't have a good reputation, you're going to go out of business.
Is there a certain type of person who becomes or is a CEO?
They all just lead in a different style. But there are some things in common, and it's not personality. It's one, the ability to conceive the future. You can't create what you can't conceive, you see. And if you're really insecure, it'll kill you. It'll eat you up.
Here's Better Business Bureau CEO and President Bill Mitchell speaking about exposing, confronting, and arbitrating the unfair and unethical business practices all around us. First of all, let's talk about the actual Better Business Bureau itself. A lot of people may think it's a government institution, a federally funded body. That's not true.
No, it isn't. I think it's a common misconception that the Better Business Bureau is a government agency of some sort. The reality is that we are a private, not-for-profit corporation.
I think a lot of people are under the belief that the Better Business Bureau will fight for them, which they do, but up to a point.
I mean, people want to know, how did this company treat their other customers? The number one type of complaint that we get is against these work-at-home type companies. I'm sure you've seen ads like in the newspaper and so forth.
Make hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, make $1,500 a week stuffing envelopes, okay? And all you have to do is send in $50, $75 or whatever, and
now,
you're
of course,
on your
you would think if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, but a lot of people don't think that.
People believe what they read, and unfortunately, but and these are just complete scams.
Maybe there's a warning sign there when you do see something like that that's posted perhaps on a signpost or a street lamp. Maybe that's not the most believable advertising medium that there is.
A lot of people think if they see an ad in, say, a newspaper, that it couldn't possibly be false, or the newspaper wouldn't permit it to be printed. But
the newspapers, they're not responsible for
they're not.
the content of the ads.
And of course, economic conditions dictate the ads that they'll accept often. I mean, unfortunately, when times get tough, the media's ad standards tend to kind of decline a little bit, and
because they need those ad dollars, and they'll
absolutely
take, if you have an advertisement, they'll place it.
Absolutely.
So just because it's in print, or perhaps even on television, doesn't necessarily mean that it's true.
That is absolutely correct.
What about automobiles? I would imagine we spend so much of our life in cars and buying cars and looking at cars that a large portion of your efforts are directed toward investigating these types of complaints.
They are indeed. Automobiles rank right up there towards the top in terms of the numbers of complaints that we get.
What does lemon law really mean?
Well, basically, in the context of the work that we do, it means that if you purchase a new vehicle during the first 12 months or 12,000 miles, if you have trouble with that vehicle, in other words, if it's in the shop for 4 or more times on any particular problem or out of service for more than 30 days, then there's a presumption that the vehicle is defective, that it's a lemon.
And this is regarding new vehicles only?
New vehicles only, yes, and that the manufacturer, not the dealer, the manufacturer must buy that vehicle back.
Let's talk about kids, because I know that there is a large amount of allowance given from parents to children on a yearly basis. I believe it's in the billions of dollars. Here it is, $6 billion in America is given from parents to their children each year. That's a lot of spending power that these kids have in their hand. And we know, and it's not just on Saturday morning television, that there's a lot of advertising directed right at these young spenders who can be as young, I assume, as perhaps they can't reach the cash register, but I think by age 6 or 7, a lot of children are exerting a lot of influence in terms of what is bought in terms of toys and clothing and cereal and everything else.
Right.
But there's also something very interesting that parents can do with their children as they're watching television with their children, reviewing what it is that the kids are watching on TV, and actually having the parent engage in a dialogue with the child to analyze the ad and say, what do you think this product is about? And is that a real person, or is that somebody in a suit? And in other words, infusing a little bit of reality into what it is the child is watching, helping the child perhaps grow up and be a little bit more discerning in terms of what's real and what's not real.
Right. This is an educational process, really.
Next, it's on to John Alderson, the Chief Operating Officer of the fastest growing coffee shop franchise in America, It's a Grind. John and I discuss how to rapidly grow a national franchise into the number 2 player behind Starbucks by delivering a new level of service to the customer. It really started out as a mom and pop shop back in '95.
Right.
Almost 10 years ago.
Right. Exactly. They also saw the success of some of our competitors out there, namely Starbucks Coffee, and looked at it and just thought that there was not only an opportunity, but a business that they could get really excited about. And they viewed every person that came in as an opportunity to create a special little moment in time for another human being. We have been incredibly selective in who we bring on board as franchisees. And I think most franchisors look to the financial requirements to make sure that people are financially qualified, and that's the end of it.
If they've got the money, they're in.
If they've got the money, they're in, and they view it as that's the way the franchisor is going to grow, is by selling franchises and then collecting those royalties. We actually turn down at least 50% of the people who come in are qualified, have an interest, have the dollars, and we just don't think that they're going to represent the brand well in the marketplace.
Because maybe they have a more transactional focus than an experiential focus.
Absolutely.
Is there a mission statement for It's a Grind? Is there a core value statement?
Yeah, absolutely. 95% of the companies out there, you go in and there's the mission statement right up there on the wall, and you go out to where it really matters, which is where a customer is dealing with an employee.
Not so much.
And maybe they don't even know what it is, and they certainly don't know how it relates to them.
Right.
What Marty and Louise's passion was, and what it continues to be today, huge commitment to abused and abandoned animals, huge commitment to abused or battered women, huge commitment to the Boys and Girls Clubs, huge huge commitment to the churches in the Long Beach area in providing free coffee for all of their events.
Excellent.
So that they really are in touch with the local community. And I've never seen another industry quite like it, because you've got the gorilla, Starbucks, and I think they're up to between 5,000 and 6,000 locations in the U.S., and they announced a target last month of, I think, 30,000 stores worldwide within the next 5 years. I mean, their growth is incredible, what they've been able to do. And yet on a national level, there's not a real number 2 player out there. We don't see any reason why, if we are diligent about the details, that we can't be the number 2 player in the coffee industry.
Let's turn now to Venture and Technology Management Group CEO Dr. William Selesky, speaking about how socially responsible executive management and governance in startups can speed profitability. In the venture capital marketplace, it's a different animal than it was a few years ago.
Oh, yes.
What changes, what dramatic changes, or even more subtle changes are you seeing and do you predict for the venture marketplace?
Oh, in today's market, if you don't have the company, if you find an angel investor who helps you get going, you have to be at revenue. And you have to show that the concept is at least producing revenue.
Is there a trend that you're starting to see where the investors are looking towards to say this is the hot new growth market, or one of them?
Well, traditionally software has always been strong.
Now you think and talk like an MBA, and yet you have a PhD in engineering from Berkeley. In the MBA world, freshly minted graduates coming out rosy and fresh-faced, attacking the world, they obviously have a great focus in terms of finance and the bottom line, and profitability. Do you see these new MBA grads nowadays having a broad view of the world also, or is it still very much focused, if it's profitable, it's good, and nothing else matters, or are they looking at things more holistically, perhaps?
The students I've found are broad. In fact, it's impressive.
Let's talk about that, giving back to the community. And most investors, of course, they want profitable performance over the long term. They want to see revenues increase and profit margins increase. Are you seeing a trend among investors regarding SRI, or what some people are calling SRI, socially responsible investing? Are you seeing that that segment increase, that awareness increase, or has it remained pretty steady over the years?
We do have in Southern California a terrific amount of work on clean fuels, and we look at the hybrids and other technologies. So I think the market's headed that direction. Certainly, look at the success of the hybrid automobiles, and that you have to order and wait for one.
It's not just Cameron Diaz driving a Prius nowadays. It's a lot more people.
No, and you think about what fuel costs and what drives it. Unfortunately, $3 a gallon gas may have been what tipped the scales, but people are now saying, well, it's less expensive and it's good for the environment. It's a win-win for everyone.
We now take another look at our discussion with Emmy Award winner Judd McIlvaine, an investigative reporter with CBS News and ABC News. Judd pulls no punches, talking about ethical practices in television news, attending college with future Enron chairman Kenneth Lay, and working in the newsroom with Dan Rather.
So many people think I haven't done my job unless somebody slams a door in my face, but there is a lot more to it.
Where did you get this bulldog attitude to go after these kind of stories?
Well, I first got it in Texas because we found out people love the stories when you actually help somebody, when you go to bat for them.
During those early years, you went to high school, and I believe you also went to college with somebody who's been in the news quite a bit lately, Mr. Kenneth Lay, the former chairman of Enron Corporation.
That's right. We called him Kenny Lay, of course, and he was one of the real smart people at high school. I mean, he was making a lot higher grades than I made, and he was very popular. And then he went on to the University of Missouri. I did too. I took journalism. He went on the business side, and he told everybody he's going to change the way business is done in this country.
What did he mean by that?
He never explained to me how he was going to change it. But
I guess
now
he succeeded in a way, right?
Yeah, now we know he changed it very simply. He had one set of books here and one set of books here.
Now, he was offered a chance to actually talk about his side of the story, and I believe you were involved in that. He had an opportunity to speak to the national audience on 48 Hours, I believe?
On CBS's 48 Hours, since I knew Kenny.
Another co-worker in your past that you worked very closely with, I believe back in Texas, is Mr. Dan Rather, another man who's very much in the news lately, recently having announced his upcoming departure from CBS at the anchor desk.
Dan and I worked together in Houston, Texas. I have a feeling he depended on his producers. But apparently he wanted that story to be true so badly that he didn't do any checking. But remember, he is the managing editor. He's not just the anchor that reads the story.
He is.
He is the managing editor. It's his responsibility.
Here's a lively, often funny interview with former UCI Assistant Dean Philip Henderson, speaking about the differences between personal ethics and workplace ethics, about the importance of listening, and about magic. Saying that oftentimes people, quote unquote, check their ethics at the door. In other words, they are a good person at home, they do lead by example with their family, but when they walk across that threshold into the office, it's all about money, profits at any expense. Do you see that to be true?
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
You have a membership in a very interesting organization, the International Listening Association.
Yes.
Thinking back to our teenage years, it was very difficult to relate to our parents because we felt like they simply didn't understand. They wouldn't understand if we were to express
I
them.
imagine that you were raised similarly to me. My parents said children should be seen
And not heard.
and not heard.
Right.
And that principle seems to be passed down into other generations as well. So we need to stop that. We need to hear our children.
And I guess moving back to the business side, that applies equally well to work. Now you have to explain, how do you do magic without the tricks? Or maybe that would violate the principles.
No.
Next up is our eye-opening talk with Russ Hill, CEO of Halbert Hargrove Investment Counsel. Russ speaks candidly about socially responsible investing and how well-researched investment in SRI funds can result in better than Standard & Poor's performance, plus the knowledge that your money is being utilized in support of the important area of corporate social responsibility. What do you tell your clients who are interested, or casually interested at least, about socially responsible investing?
Over $2 trillion in some way or other being invested according to social responsibility screens.
$2 trillion.
$2 trillion, about $1 in every $11 that's professionally managed.
That's grown tremendously over the years.
Yes, it has.
How do you feel about the definitions, the varying definitions about SRI?
Well, I think it's going to be very hard to come up with a single standard. Typically, tobacco and alcohol, employment relations, the environment, and labor relations are the top five. There are people that won't own Burger King because it will buy beef from around the world, which has contributed to clearing of rainforests in Brazil. McDonald's buys primarily domestic beef, at least where they can for the U.S. stores. So in that sense, they're a better company, but how far do you take it?
What is the best way to evaluate an SRI fund?
I think the performance has been pretty clearly demonstrated to not be inferior to non-screened funds. In fact, most of the academic research has tried to prove that you didn't pay anything for having a social preference.
So that's the bottom level bar. It should not be inferior to the success rate of a non-screened fund.
Absolutely. When you make an investment that has social impact, you really are making two kinds of statements. Usually you're trying to make one to the company, that is, there's a practice we want you to change, or we applaud yours.
We believe in you, or you need to look at this issue.
Exactly, and a lot of times that's very effective communication. At the same time, you're communicating to your own constituents that this is your belief system, and if you want to sign on with us, this is what you get. So you have to be careful with that.
Do you believe the CSR movement, as it were, is simply an exercise in greenwashing annual reports and trying to look better than a company really is? Or is it truly something that is becoming a benchmark for how a company should operate?
Well, there's probably elements of both to answer your question directly, and some companies are, in fact, just putting on a facade. Long-term environmental responsibility, for example, ought to make your profitability more sustainable.
Do you think that we're over the ethical hump, or do you think we still have a long way to go?
When you think about socially responsible investing and corporate ethics, there are a lot of things that people can do both by what they purchase and by how they act, as well as how they invest.
Let's talk about that.
Well, for example, it's funny when you talk to people in public and they say, well, I really believe in the environment, and then they go out and get in their SUV and drive home.
Get in the Hummer.
Yeah, and so, we have to do a better job of watching how we deal with our own recycling, how we deal with our driving, and all sorts of things. So it's not
walking the talk on an individual level.
Absolutely. You got to do that first, and then try to get your organizations to do the same thing.
Let's take a look at our chat with Laserfiche CEO Nai-Ling Wacker and Sales VP Chris Wacker, discussing corporate compliance with new laws such as Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, and the Patriot Act. Nai-Ling also talks about female leadership of large technology companies. And nowadays, of course, there's a lot of regulations afoot, brand new laws. We mentioned during the intro about Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, and the Patriot Act. And now, as opposed to just good business practices to have your documents at your fingertips, it's a law now.
Yeah, that's right.
And a part of the Patriot Act, I believe, is the know your customer provision. In other words, if you're doing business with an entity, you should really know who they are. And yet you have a responsibility, if you're doing business, to keep that information confidential.
That's right.
This is a new customer for you, the newly formed government of Iraq.
Yes, they're using it in their foreign ministry to start, and actually it's a very innovative application.
In fact, they share some of the information with American Homeland Security.
Because it really is a national security type of issue, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Mexico, just like we, need to know exactly who's coming in and out of the country so we can share information. You are running a business as a woman, as a minority. There is California. There's no better place, I think, for women to run companies. I believe the stats are something like 1.25 million businesses in California are run by women. And yet, on a national level, when you look at the people who are heading Fortune 500 corporations, only 10 of those Fortune 500s are being run by women.
I think in the organization, especially in a growing mode, you really need a nurturing person.
You can actually take that inherent benefit of being a woman, which is that nurturing soul, and put that towards the benefit of running a business.
Yes, absolutely. If a CEO actually sets the tone, sets the direction, and help the culture of the company.
Hopefully a culture of efficiency and balance.
Exactly.
Finally, here's a minute or so of our talk with Andy Mercy, CEO of Angel Point Software, a company that helps large corporations coordinate and manage their employees' volunteer activities.
Our basic belief is that doing good is good for business.
So I've read that you've lived in Africa, in Senegal, Africa, studying rural farming practices. You've taught skiing in Colorado, and you spent 40 nights on an Alaskan glacier.
That's right.
So kind of matches, if you will, act as a matchmaker.
It's a dating service for volunteerism.
A dating service for volunteerism.
Absolutely.
There's your new catchphrase right there. Do you find that companies with an in-place community relations program are also socially responsible in other areas in terms of the environment, sustainability, and so forth?
I absolutely do.
So there they were, the top 10 moments of good business. If you're a conscientious consumer, please try to buy from conscientious companies. Conscientious companies are both profitable and ethical. Instead of merely greenwashing, they've invested significant time and money into elevating their level of social and environmental awareness. They deserve to celebrate and publicize such an accomplishment. That's where good business comes in. I'm Lee Godden. Thank you for watching.